February 2026, 3 million documents released, a network exposed. But here's what no one is saying. The trauma of trafficking doesn't end when the victim escapes. It doesn't even end when that survivor's lifetime. It writes itself into DNA. It alters the stress response of children not yet born. And it creates epigenetic markers that echo through 3, 4, and even 5 generations. This is not a metaphor. This is molecular biology. And if we don't understand how deeply trauma seeds itself biologically, genetically, and spiritually, we will never understand why autoimmune disease, addiction, and chronic illness are epidemic in families that carry this hidden history. Today, we're going deeper than headlines. We're going into the cells, the genes, and the soul. Welcome back to Let's Talk Wellness Now. We're here to uncover root causes, explore regenerative medicine, and empower you to heal from the inside out. I'm Dr. Deb, your medical detective. And today we're confronting one of the most important and least discussed wellness topics of our time: how the exploitation and trafficking of women and children doesn't just harm individuals, it damages bloodlines. And if you're someone who carries an unexplained chronic illness, autoimmune disease, addiction, or trauma that seems to have no clear origin, this episode may finally connect the dots. Grab your cup of tea or coffee, settle in, and let's go deep into this subject. Did you know sweating can literally heal your cells? Infrared saunas don't just relax you. They detox your body, balance hormones, and boost mitochondrial energy. I'm obsessed with my Health Tech sauna. And right now, you can save $500 with my code at healthtech.com/dr-muth-req-25. Let's start with what just happened. In February of 2026, the Department of Justice released over 3 million pages of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. According to The Guardian on February 2nd, 2026, these files contained allegations that Epstein didn't just abuse women, he provided them to other powerful men. One accuser identified Harvey Weinstein from a photo lineup describing coercion and payment. Another FBI document described threats of force. Latvia launched a criminal investigation after the files linked Epstein's network to modeling agencies overseas. But here's what I need you to understand. As a practitioner who treats trauma survivors, Epstein's operation was not new. It was ancient. From Mesopotamian slave codes to Roman markets to the transatlantic trade, trafficking has always been about the same thing: power and exploiting vulnerability for profit. The tools change. Private jets instead of ships, social media instead of market squares, but the wound, it's identical. And that wound, it doesn't heal when the victim is freed. It embeds itself into biology. Let me explain what happens when a human being experiences the kind of trauma that trafficking creates. The immediate biological response. When someone is trafficked, their body enters a state of chronic survival mode. The autonomic nervous system, which controls unconscious functions like heart rate, digestion, immune response, it gets locked into a fight or flight. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, floods the system, at least at first. This is protective. But when the threat never ends, when abuse is daily, when escape is impossible, cortisol stays elevated for months and even years. And here's what chronic cortisol does. It suppresses immune function, making the body vulnerable to infections, cancer, and autoimmune disease. It disrupts the gut microbiome, leading to leaky gut, food sensitivity, and systemic inflammation. It dysregulates hormone production, thyroid sex hormones, insulin, and it creates metabolic chaos. It damages the hippocampus, the part of the brain region responsible for memory and emotional regulation. But it goes deeper than that. Cellular memory, trauma written into our tissues. Research published in the Biological Psychiatry of 2025 and Frontiers in Psychiatry 2025 shows that trauma doesn't just affect the brain, it reprograms cells throughout the body. Mitochondria, the energy factories inside every cell, shift from producing ATP energy to producing reactive oxygen species, stress signals. This is why trauma survivors often develop chronic fatigue syndrome. That cortisol over time starts to dive down and eventually can't be produced when it's supposed to be during a traumatic episode. And it stays at this low level, creating what we now know as chronic fatigue syndrome. Inflammatory genes turn on and stay on, even after the threat is gone. This is why we see such high rates of autoimmune disease, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, inflammatory bowel disease in trafficking survivors. The fascia, the connective tissue that wraps every muscle and organ, stores trauma physically. This is why survivors develop chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and tension that no amount of massage can release. The body literally remembers the violation at a cellular level. The ACE study, Childhood Trauma as a Disease Predictor, the CDC's Adverse Childhood Experiences Study in 2025, showed that 64% of the U.S. adults have experienced at least one ACE abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. And nearly 1 in 6 has experienced 4 or more. And the data is devastating. The ACE that you have maybe experienced, if you have had this, you have a higher risk for heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disease, depression, suicide, and addiction. Trafficking survivors often score 8, 9, or 10 out of a 10 on the ACE scale. Their bodies are biologically aged by trauma. And according to the VA's National Center for PTSD, PTSD is associated with excess mortality, meaning survivors die younger, not just from suicide, but from the stress related to chronic disease. Now, here's where it gets even more profound. What is epigenetics? Well, your DNA is like a library of instructions, but not every book is open all the time. Epigenetics is the system that decides which genes get turned on or off without changing the DNA sequence itself. And here's the critical discovery. Trauma can change those epigenetic marks, and those marks can be passed to your children. The science of inherited trauma. The studies on the Holocaust survivors and their descendants showed that children and grandchildren of trauma survivors had altered stress hormone regulation, even though they never experienced the original trauma themselves. Research on famine shows in the Netherlands during World War II found that children born to mothers who were pregnant during starvation had higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease decades later. This happens because stress during pregnancy alters the developing fetus's stress response system. And when a pregnant woman is trafficked, abused, or living in chronic fear, her elevated cortisol levels cross the placenta. The baby's developing brain is bathed in stress hormones. And the child's HPA axis, the stress regulation system, is programmed for hypervigilance. The child is born with a biological predisposition to anxiety, depression, autoimmune disease, and addiction. And it doesn't stop there. That child grows up, and if they have children, their altered stress response can influence the next generation through epigenetic inheritance and through the environment they create. This is why we see patterns of addiction, autoimmune disease, and mental illness running through families, even when there's no clear genetic mutation. It's not just genetics, it's inherited trauma written into gene expression. There is also a spiritual dimension to this. There's something beyond biology here, something that science is only beginning to touch. Survivors often describe feeling disconnected from their bodies, as if their spirit left during the abuse and never fully returned. This is disassociation, a survival mechanism. But in many healing traditions, somatic therapy, internal family systems, even ancient spiritual practices, there's recognition that trauma fragments the self. And healing isn't just about regulating cortisol or repairing the gut. It's about reuniting the spirit with the body. It's about teaching the nervous system that it's finally safe to be fully present once again. And when that happens, when one person heals that fracture, it changes the trajectory for everyone else who comes after them. So what do we do with this knowledge? Trauma-informed root cause medicine. Healing trafficking survivors and their descendants requires more than talk therapy. It requires nervous system regulation, vagal nerve stimulation, somatic experience, breath work, gut healing, repairing the microbiome, addressing that leaky gut and reducing the inflammation, hormone balancing, supporting adrenal function, thyroid and sex hormones, detoxification, clearing accumulated toxins that the stressed body couldn't process, both physically and emotionally. Nutritional restoration, replenishing the nutrients depleted by chronic stress. This is functional medicine. This is what I do every day with my team. Second, we need epigenetic reversal, and that is actually possible. Here's the hope. Epigenetic marks can be changed. Studies show that meditation therapy, safe relationships, and even nutrition can reverse some of the epigenetic damage caused by trauma. Every time a survivor learns to regulate their nervous system, they're not just healing themselves, they're changing what gets passed to the next generation. Third, we have to speak the truth. Silence protects the perpetrators. Truth-telling breaks generational curses. And every time we name trafficking for what it is, crime that damages biology, genetics, and spirit, we create the space for healing. Thank you for going deep with me today on Let's Talk Wellness Now. If this episode moved you, share it, because healing begins when we stop pretending trauma is only psychological and we start treating it as a biological, genetic, and spiritual crisis that it truly is. If you or someone you love needs trauma-informed care, visit serenityhealthcarecenter.com or explore our functional medicine platform at venari.com. Survivors seeking support can reach the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. Join our Seen at Last Facebook group, which is a free community where we support women to be seen at last. I'm Dr. Deb. Take care of your body, mind, and spirit. Be well, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Welcome to Let's Talk Wellness Now, where we bring expert insights to you. Please note that the views and information shared by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Let's Talk Wellness Now, its management, or our partners. Each affiliate, sponsor, and partner is an independent entity with its own perspectives. Today's content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered specific advice, whether financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your unique circumstances. We encourage you to consult a qualified professional to address your individual needs. Your use of information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By continuing to listen, you agree to indemnify and hold Let's Talk Wellness Now and its associates harmless from any claims or damages arising from the use of this content. We may update this disclaimer at any time, and changes will take effect immediately upon posting or broadcast. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you find this episode both insightful and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.